Hello, everybody of YouTube. This is Megatron the Comedian, and today I will be explaining to you why Transformers Prime, the TV show, and why Transformers Prime, the video game, don't connect to one another. And the reason why is for people who are kind of new to the Transformers franchise, or those who are who have been a part of the franchise for a while now, but you know never really saw the difference between the two and always thought that they connected with one another. Now, to the point is that, well, supposedly they say that Transformers Prime, the video game, takes place at some time during season two, but it really doesn't make any sense because, well, number one, Starscream, Dreadwing, and Arachnid were never really on the same side as one another. Sure, Arachnid may have been on the same side as Starscream for a few episodes, but then Starscream betrayed the Decepticons because of how Megatron was treating him, and he didn't feel like he was an actual part of the Decepticons, especially due to the fact that Arachnid was kind of manipulating her way up the ranks. Because prior to all this, she had, of course, crashed on Earth, fought RC in the forest, and then she goes after the Polarity Gauntlet, later on. As a result, then she ends up fighting Breakdown, Bulkhead, and RC. And then she ends up getting stuck to Breakdown himself, and he takes her back to the Decepticon warship, and then presumably from there she rejoins the Decepticon ranks. So then, as I just explained a few seconds ago, she's manipulating her way up the ranks, and then when Megatron sends the both of them on a mission together to go retrieve the immobilizer, she betrays Starscream and manages to stick him in one of her webs while she goes after the immobilizer herself. And while Bumblebee, Bulkhead, and Optimus go after Arachnid, RC is stuck with Starscream, right? And then Starscream eventually, as we know, ends up slipping and says that he's the one that offed Cliffjumper after Arachnid had, after he thought that Arachnid was taking credit for killing Cliffjumper. When RC was saying that Arachnid was responsible for, killing Tailgate. So then that's presumably what decided to make that's what made Starscream decide that he was gonna go rogue and leave the Decepticons and not join the Autobots. And he would remain rogue for the rest of season one, going to the very tail end of season two, right? And Arachnid would remain Megatron's second in command until a little early on into season two. But then, of course, then Megatron tells Dreadwing and Breakdown to go destroy her in a forest because he had recently figured out that she tried to betray him during the whole Unicron story arc in the show. And I think she eventually ended up catching wind of this in the episode. And this is why she ended up, offing Breakdown. And because she was bugging him about his, loss of an eye and stuff. And because we all know that he had been captured at some point during season one and was being experimented on by Mech, which resulted in him being, having his eye lost. And so she was bugging him about that. That sent him into a flying rage. He tried to off her, but he failed and ended up getting offed himself, And Dreadwing would go on to become Megatron's new second in command for the rest of season 2. So another thing is that later in that same episode, she off breakdown, she ends up gaining control of an Insecticon that she was gonna use to fight Megatron with. That Insecticon ended up losing. She ended up retreating because she was fighting RC. And um, then what else? So then at the very end of the episode, she ends up finding the entire Insecticon hive that she tries to use against Megatron later in the show. Now, here's where it gets confusing because in the video game, she's still a Decepticon when she already has control of the Insecticon hive. So, how is it that in the actual show she's rogue and using the Insecticons against Megatron, but in the show, or in the video game actually, she's using them against, or like she's using them against the Autobots and not the Decepticons? To me, that doesn't make sense. And then the fact that she's still on the same side as Starscream and Dreadwing, when she's already when with Starscream, she already manipulated her way up the ranks and made herself Megatron's second in command. And then when by the time Dreadwing joins the show, she betrays the Decepticons like 2 or 3 episodes after he joined. She betrays them again and offs breakdown. You know, to me that doesn't make any sense. So, especially due to the fact that like if Knockout could experiment on Silas for being the new host of Breakdown's body, why is he not going to want to do something similar to Breakdown, or I mean Arachnid, when she's the one that off Breakdown to begin with? Or why not have Megatron destroy Arachnid himself? I mean, she already tried to do that he already tried to do that technically with the Insecticon, but that didn't fail that failed because she got away and he was dealing with the Insecticon. Another thing is the whole case of Thunderwing, because not once was he exactly ever referenced in the show itself. Like, even though that, yeah, Unicron had made an appearance in the show, and before and after his defeat, they still referenced him, whereas Thunderwing, they never referenced him at all in the show, and only in the video game. So another thing being is that the way he destroyed the Decepticon warship in the video game, like he destroyed the Decepticon warship beyond repair, whereas the episode where Starscream and Arachnid try using their own methods of offing Megatron with Starscream and his clones and Arachnid and her Insecticons, in that same episode, Bulkhead found himself stuck on the Decepticon warship, and the only way that he was able to get off was by crashing it, by subsequently destroying the Decepticon Energon core. But at least that was more repairable because Megatron managed to rebuild it with Dark Energon, thinking that he was gonna have a psychic link with the ship, which didn't work out because then that essentially reactivated Trypticon. For those that played both the War for Cybertron video games, it gets explained at some point that Trypticon becomes the Nemesis. Considering the fact that both the Cybertron games connect to Transformers Prime, the TV show. So, yeah, in the show, Trypticon is supposedly the Nemesis, right? So, that of course ended up reactivating Trypticon, and he, put the Decepticons and Autobots on stasis lock until Jack, Miko, and Raph had to basically reverse what Megatron had done. But when Megatron put the Dark Energon Cube in the energy core, it was able to repair it and regenerate it from when Bulk had crashed it. Whereas Thunderwing did way more damage than what Bulkhead had done. Beyond repair, to where the point Megatron would not be able to regenerate it. So yeah. That's basically my whole thing. And then the whole thing with Dreadwing and Starscream, we all know that, again, they weren't on the same side. And the fact that by the time Starscream rejoins the cons, he gets made into Megatron's second in command again. And after Dreadwing tries to off Starscream for what he did to Skyquake, when Starscream tried to bring back Skyquake from the dead. And Dreadwing didn't like the fact that Starscream was trying to bring back his twin brother from the dead, essentially saying, oh yeah, that's desecrating my brother's grave, and I don't like it, so I'm gonna go, destroy him for it. And of course that resulted in Megatron destroying Dreadwing. So that's another thing. I think that should pretty much prove as to why they don't connect, because of all the obvious inconsistencies. Like, okay, I know that the Align continuity is known for its major inconsistencies between the Cybertron games and the actual TV show, but I feel like this should further prove as to why both the video game and the show don't connect. I think that's pretty much it, because I can't think of anything else as far as like Dreadwing, Starscream, and Arachnid not being on the same side, or Thunderwing destroying the Decepticon warship. So yeah, I don't think that there's any way for them to connect. Oh, and there's another thing. We all know when in the video game, Knockout, like when you fight Knockout for the final time in the video game, he ends up like saying, "Oh, you scratched my paint. That was a big mistake." He transforms and starts driving towards Bumblebee, trying to knock him off the warship. And then Bumblebee ends up dodging him, and he ends up falling, and Knockout ends up falling off the Decepticon warship. Knockout did not survive that, I'm pretty sure. Especially considering the fact that Megatron even says a little bit later in the game that it was apparently Starscream's fault that that they had lost Knockout. But it was like, okay, the reason why I don't think Knockout could have possibly survived that is because he is no more durable than a Viacon. He does not have that much more durability than a Viacon. Okay? Because think about it. At some point in season 2, when Smokescreen is fleeing from the Decepticon warship, when he takes 2 of the Omega keys that the Autobots need to reactivate or to activate the Omega lock, he ends up jumping off the Decepticon warship, and he turns the phase shifter on so that way in case if he hits the floor, he could just phase right through it. And Megatron ended up throwing 2 Viacons off the Decepticon warship, one of them being a flyer and then the other one being just a car. So by the time that the Viacon, the one who turned into the car, by the time he fell to the floor, he exploded. He was done for. Like, he did not survive the fall, for those that watched the episode. So I'm pretty sure Knockout would have befallen the same fate as this Viacon, because there's just no way that Knockout could have survived that unless if Soundwave somehow managed to do the same thing that Ratchet did with Smokescreen and managed to lock onto his coordinates and managed to open a space bridge before Knockout fell. So it's just like that Knockout surviving is not a possibility. Okay, especially the way he fell off the Decepticon warship. Okay, which was pretty much the same way, which is pretty much around the same way that Megatron threw off that Viacon in that one episode. Okay, so I don't think Knockout could have survived because again, he does not have that much durability. Okay, he does not have more durability than a freaking Viacon. Okay, so that's my analysis as to why I don't think that they connect. Um, Again, I think that's pretty much about it. Um, Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I know that I might have said the same thing more than once, but then again, I just want to be able to get it through people's skulls that Transformers Prime, the video game, does not connect to the actual show just because it has the same name and the same characters that appear in the show. That's just my opinion. So thank you for listening. This has been Megatron the Comedian signing out.